Why is it that those we love the most become the very ones who shatter us? Not enemies, not strangers, but the ones we held close, the ones we trusted with our rawest, most unguarded self. They didn't come with weapons. They came with warmth, with affection, with tears that seemed real until silence replaced them, and a subtle, quiet destruction began. The worst betrayals don't scream. They whisper. They grow in the shadows. And when they finally surface, they don't just break the bond. They break the story you believed about love. Carl Jung didn't call it evil. He called it unconscious. A shadow, repressed, unseen, but real enough to ruin what seemed sacred. This is not just about pain. It's about perception. It's about projection. It's about how our deepest wounds echo through our closest relationships, and how the people who carry the most love for us can also carry the most repressed rage, envy, or shame. You were not wrong for loving, but now it's time to see clearly. Let's go beneath the surface, into the mind. The shadow, the hidden mechanisms of betrayal, because to understand why it happened is to finally be free. Betrayal doesn't arrive as a storm. It arrives quietly through familiar eyes, familiar hands, and words once spoken in love. It's not random, it's not always malicious, and it's almost never about you. Carl Jung didn't describe the betrayer as evil. He described them as divided, split between the image they show the world and the truth they've buried within. Because betrayal is rarely a conscious decision, it's a psychic reaction. A response from a part of the self that's been exiled for too long. The unconscious doesn't speak in language. It speaks in patterns, in projections, in ruptures that feel personal but are rooted in wounds that came long before you. Sometimes, you weren't betrayed for anything you did. You were betrayed for what you represented. Your wholeness triggered their fragmentation. Your calm exposed their chaos. Your honesty made their facade unbearable. And in that discomfort, they didn't choose healing. They chose escape. Betrayal, then, is not just an act of disloyalty. It's an act of unconscious preservation. The mind protects itself, even if it must destroy the relationship to do it. Jung believed that most people will do anything to avoid facing their own soul, even if it means hurting someone who never meant them harm. So when betrayal enters your life, don't just ask, "Why did they do this to me?" Ask, what part of themselves were they trying not to see? Because once you understand that, you stop internalizing the pain and start witnessing the wound that caused it. And if you've ever wondered why betrayal seems to strike from those closest to you, those you nurtured, trusted, maybe even saved, the answer may lie deeper still, in something darker, more concealed, and more corrosive: envy. The silent killer of closeness. The root beneath the root. Let's go there next. Betrayal often wears the mask of confusion, but behind that mask, behind the wound it leaves, is a force far older, far more insidious: envy. It doesn't shout, it doesn't declare war. It whispers in silence, smiles in pretense, and waits in the dark until it no longer can. Envy isn't loud, it's corrosive, not hatred, not revenge. What drives many betrayals is not anger at what you did, but resentment for who you are. They didn't hate you. They hated the reflection you held up. Your calmness reminded them of their inner chaos. Your self-assurance exposed their self-doubt. Your rising made their stagnation unbearable. To someone who hasn't done their inner work, your success feels like a spotlight on their shame. And so, instead of facing that shadow within, they turn their discomfort outward. They criticize. They withdraw. They betray. Not because you wounded them, but because you didn't. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." And envy, when repressed, doesn't disappear. It mutates into projection, into passive cruelty, into sabotage dressed as disappointment. They may say you've changed, that you've become arrogant, distant, too much. But what they really mean is, you've become someone I can't pretend to feel equal to anymore. The tragedy is, envy often strikes not from enemies, but from the people closest to you. Because the closer someone is, the more they see. And the more they see, the more they compare. They don't envy strangers. They envy the friend who mirrors their unfulfilled potential, the lover who reflects their emotional immaturity, the sibling who awakens their forgotten dreams. And when the pressure becomes too much, betrayal becomes a form of relief. It's not personal, but it feels like the deepest personal wound, because it comes not from your actions, but from your light. And that's the cruel irony of envy. It targets not those who harm, but those who shine. So if you've ever been betrayed for being too kind, too generous, too radiant, understand this. You didn't provoke their betrayal. You revealed what they were hiding. Now we must go deeper. Because envy isn't just an emotion. It's a story the psyche writes, and that story leads straight into resentment and the dangerous territory of the shadow self. Let's open that door next. The roots of betrayal stretch deeper than we like to admit. Beyond envy, beyond projection, there lives something older, something ancient and intimate, the shadow self. Jung taught that every human being carries a shadow, not evil, not monstrous, but repressed. It's the parts of ourselves we were taught to hide, the anger we weren't allowed to express, the desire we were shamed for feeling, the ambition we were told was too much, the truth that made others uncomfortable. And so we bury them. But what is buried doesn't die. It waits. And when ignored long enough, it begins to move on its own. For those who refuse to face their shadow, it becomes the silent author of their actions. That's when betrayal isn't planned. It's leaked. It slips out in silence, sarcasm, distance, and coldness. In the jokes that sting, in the withdrawal that feels unexplained, in the resentment they can't name but you feel in your bones. They didn't wake up one day and choose to betray you. They carried it, slowly, secretly. A quiet accumulation of unspoken envy, unacknowledged shame, unmet needs they never dared admit. And you became the mirror. You showed them something they weren't ready to see. They denied hunger, their forgotten fire, their unhealed wound. You didn't cause resentment, but you became its surface. Because in the presence of your wholeness, their fragmentation became unbearable. And so the shadow did what it always does. It reached for release. even if it meant cutting the very bond it longed to preserve. This is why betrayal often comes disguised in confusion. Why does it leave you wondering, what did I do? And the answer, heartbreakingly, is often this: you simply were. Their resentment wasn't sudden, it was slow. It simmered beneath years of politeness, of unspoken expectations, of subtle comparisons and silent shame. And then, one moment, one misunderstanding, one shift. The volcano erupted, but the lava wasn't about you. It was about the pressure that built up long before you arrived. So the question becomes, if the shadow can destroy what we love when left unexamined, what happens when we finally turn to face it? What happens when we bring the darkness into the light? Let's move into that next. There's a deeper layer still. Beneath resentment, beneath envy, beneath even the shadow's hidden wounds lies something more tragic. Not all betrayal is an attack. Some betrayals are self-destructions that spill outward. They didn't betray you to win. They betrayed you to run not from you, but from themselves. Carl Jung called this the inner saboteur, the part of the psyche that whispers, "You don't deserve this." They'll leave anyway. Better to destroy it now than wait to be abandoned. It's not rational, it's not deliberate, but it's real. This is trauma logic. The voice of a wounded self still stuck in the past, repeating old pain, recreating familiar chaos, even in the presence of real love. Somewhere in their story, they learned that intimacy equals danger, that being seen means being hurt, that love always ends in loss. So when you offer safety, when you offer presence, when you offer trust, it feels foreign, unfamiliar, unbearable. Because it contradicts the story they've lived by. So they act out, they cheat, they lie, they ghost, they push away the very thing they ache for. Not because they want to hurt you, but because your love made them feel exposed. The irony is brutal. They long for connection, but fear it more than loneliness. They ruin the good, so they don't have to face the grief of possibly losing it later. They hurt you so they don't have to feel how unworthy they still believe they are. And when you look at them and say, "I chose you, I saw you, I believed in you," it breaks something inside them, because it's easier to be abandoned than to believe they could be truly loved. Jung believed we recreate the past until we become conscious of it. That means until they do their inner work, they will keep sabotaging every good thing that touches them. So no, it wasn't about you. It was about a version of them that still lives in fear. But here's the hard truth. You cannot save someone who is loyal to their wound. You cannot hold together what they're actively trying to destroy. You can only choose to let go before their self-betrayal becomes yours too. And if this story feels familiar, if you've seen this pattern more than once, then maybe it's time to turn the question inward. Why does this keep happening? To me, let's explore that next. If betrayal has become a pattern in your life, it's not about luck, and it's not about being too kind or too trusting. It's about something deeper, quieter, something your conscious mind may not yet see. Carl Jung wasn't interested in blame. He was interested in awareness. He didn't ask, "Why did they hurt you?" he asked, Why were you drawn to someone who could? Because the people who hurt us the most often reflect parts of ourselves we haven't healed. We don't just fall into betrayal, we sometimes gravitate toward it, because on some level we've made it familiar. A parent who invalidated your needs. A childhood where love came with conditions. A first betrayal you never fully understood. It leaves an imprint, and the psyche, longing to resolve the past, will seek out echoes of the wound and call it fate. You might stay too long, not because you don't see the signs, but because your nervous system recognizes the chaos as home. You confuse suffering with loyalty. You confuse pain with passion. You confuse silence with strength. This isn't foolishness, it's conditioning. And Jung called this repetition compulsion, a drive to recreate early pain in hopes of finally rewriting the ending. But betrayal can't be healed by reliving it, only by recognizing it. Ask yourself gently, where did I silence my intuition to keep the peace? Where did I offer grace when I needed to set a boundary? Where did I abandon my truth in hopes that love would stay? These are not questions of shame. They are questions of awakening. Because once you see the pattern, you can step out of it. You can stop being the emotional container for someone else's shadow. You can stop rescuing people who punish you for seeing their wounds. You can stop accepting pain as a form of connection. And that's where healing begins. Not when they stop betraying you, but when you stop betraying yourself. So if your heart still carries the question, why does this keep happening to me? Don't answer with guilt. Answer with curiosity. Because the betrayal wasn't just a break in trust. It was a message from your psyche, wake up. Reclaim yourself. Choose differently. And now the invitation is this, to heal not just from betrayal, but from the self-forgetting that came before it. Let's explore how. Let's walk the path toward healing. Not through forgetting, but through remembering who you truly are. You've seen the pattern. You've touched the wound. Now comes the most sacred part of the journey, the healing. Carl Jung never asked you to move on. He asked you to go inward, not to escape the pain, but to let it reveal what's been buried underneath. Healing doesn't mean forcing yourself to be okay. It means allowing the not okayness to speak, to breathe, to finally be felt without shame. The betrayal wasn't just an ending, it was a mirror. And healing means standing in front of that mirror and choosing not to look away. Ask yourself gently, what part of me accepted the pain as normal? What was I trying to prove by staying silent? What truth about myself am I now ready to reclaim? Jung called this integration the act of reclaiming the lost parts of the soul. The rage you swallowed, the grief you minimized, the boundaries you were never taught to set. All of them deserve a seat at the table now. This is not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. The pain doesn't disappear, but it transforms when you allow it to move through you. When you stop suppressing it. When you stop apologizing for it. Let yourself grieve not just the person who betrayed you, but the version of you who tolerated it. Write the letter you'll never send. Burn the story they made you carry. Let the tears come without explanation. And when the voice of shame says, "You should have known better," you answer with gentleness, "I didn't know until now." That is how healing begins, not as a dramatic transformation, but as a quiet returning. returning to the self, to the truth, to the sacred place within you that betrayal tried to sever. And when you heal from that place, you don't just protect yourself. You awaken yourself. You stop looking for love that demands you shrink. You stop negotiating your worth. You begin to walk differently, not harder, but wiser, softer, clearer. Because Jung taught that the wound is not the end, it's the portal. And once you've walked through it, you begin to see betrayal not just as something you survived, but at the moment you finally remembered who you are. And now, as the pain begins to soften, a new question arises: will I keep repeating the past? Or will I choose to live from the clarity it gave me? Let's look at that next. You've done the inner work. You've faced the wound. But what if it keeps happening? What if betrayal returns in different bodies, different names, but the same ache? Then it's not just heartbreak, it's a pattern. And patterns, Jung would say, are the language of the unconscious. They're not there to punish you. They're there to wake you. If betrayal keeps finding you, you are not cursed. You are repeating. Not because you want pain, but because some part of you still confuses it with love. Because chaos feels familiar. Because silence felt safer than truth. Because you were taught, somewhere long ago, that love must be earned, even if it costs you yourself. This is the inner contract. Silent, unspoken, but binding. I'll absorb your pain. If it means you won't leave, I'll lower my needs. If it means I get to stay, I'll shrink. If it helps you love me. But the soul doesn't forget these contracts. It aches under their weight. It whispers through your intuition. It warns you through your exhaustion, until one day, something inside you finally says, no more. That's the moment the pattern begins to break. Not when they change, but when you do. When you start choosing alignment over attachment, peace over performance, boundaries over being liked. And yes, it feels strange at first, because you're no longer drawn to what drains you. You stop chasing. You stop fixing. You start observing. The people who once pulled you in begin to feel heavy. You see the red flags faster. You listen to your nervous system. You honor your gut without guilt. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, not by adding more, but by remembering what was forgotten. And here's the gift. Once you stop choosing people who mirror your wounds, the world begins to reflect your healing, not perfectly, not instantly, but unmistakably. The pattern doesn't just end. It transforms into wisdom, into discernment, into a life you no longer have to survive. So if betrayal has visited you more than once, don't see it as proof of your failure. See it as a sacred call to finally come home to yourself. And when that happens, you no longer fear betrayal, because you no longer abandon your own truth to avoid it. Now, let's talk about what happens after the cycle ends. Not survival, not just healing, but becoming. There comes a moment subtle, almost silent, when the betrayal no longer haunts you, because it has transformed you. At first, it shattered everything. Your trust, your story, your sense of safety in the world. But slowly through the pain, through the grief, something began to shift. Not all at once, not like a miracle, but like a light seeping through a long-forgotten crack. You no longer ask, "Why did they do this to me?" You begin to ask, "What did this awaken in me that I had forgotten?" That question doesn't seek blame, it seeks clarity, because now you see it. The betrayal wasn't a verdict, it was a turning point. It refined you. And that is the beginning of sovereignty. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred return to wholeness. Not by rejecting the pain, but by integrating it. You carry the wound, but it no longer controls you. You've stared into the shadow, and you didn't flinch. Now, you move differently. You don't chase love, you become the space in which love can meet you. You don't explain your worth, you embody it, quietly and unapologetically. You don't fear being alone because you've found something deeper than companionship, inner communion. You trust differently now. Not blindly, not bitterly, but with discernment. You watch for patterns. You listen to energy. You honor your intuition like a sacred language. And when someone tries to return someone who once harmed you in their confusion, you don't rush to reopen the door. You ask, have they healed the part of themselves that betrayed me? If not, you bless them from a distance. Because now, you no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You no longer mistake apology for transformation. You've become the awakened one. The one who no longer builds homes in people who are still at war with themselves. The one who no longer hides their light to soothe someone else's shadow. The one who walks away, not in anger but in truth. And when you look back at the betrayal, you no longer see ruin. You see rebirth. Because pain was never meant to break you. It was meant to return you to yourself. To the voice you silenced, to the boundary you never knew you could set, to the power you forgot was yours. This is where the journey turns sacred. Because betrayal didn't just end something. It began something far more powerful, you whole, awake, and no longer willing to trade your soul for the illusion of safety. You were betrayed. Not because you were wrong, not because you were weak, but because you became a mirror. A mirror too clear, too steady, too honest, for someone who was still running from their reflection. Your love illuminated what they weren't ready to face, and instead of rising, they ran. But that moment, painful as it was not just an ending, it was an opening, a threshold, where you now stand, not asking to be chosen, but choosing yourself. You can shrink to fit the story they needed you to play, or you can awaken to the truth of who you are. This betrayal, though it cracked something in you, also revealed something sacred: your clarity, your boundaries, your unshakable worth. So let them go, not in bitterness, but in reverence for the role they played in your becoming. Because what they broke did not destroy you. It returned you to wholeness. And this time, you won't abandon yourself to stay connected. This time, you walk away holding your own hand. Subscribe if you're ready to wake up not just to the world, but to yourself. Because this channel isn't for everyone. It's for those who are done performing healing and ready to live it. Welcome to Echoes of Thought, where we don't chase strength, we embody truth.